Thank you, Kristina, for your engaging speech. My name is István Kés. I'm the Executive Director of the Danube Institute. And I will kindly ask my colleagues to join me at the first panel, Anton, Tamás, and Peter. So we're going to talk about the book itself, because everybody has his bio on the printed leaflet. I'm not going to go into very much details about each person, but we have two of our researchers here, Peter and Tamás. Peter is originally from Slovakia, actually, a Hungarian from Slovakia. He was a professor, adjunct professor at two universities in Slovakia as well. I was surprised to notice that you have a PhD in literature. I didn't know that, actually, but but good that you're a Renaissance man and has.
I have been waiting for Godot.
Okay, good to know that. And of course, we have Tamás, who is one of our foremost experts and one of our best researchers. I'm happy to say that. And he's also very much involved in writing to Hungarian Conservative, which is our own journal. And of course, last but not least, we have Anton here, who is our research director, and I think one of the leading experts on the post-Soviet region in Hungary, but I dare to say the whole Visegrádi region as well. So let's talk about the book. My first question will be a kind of a warm-up. Yes, thank you, Anton, for showing us the book itself. Why did you think writing this book is important? What was the book conceived, basically? If Anton, you can talk a bit about that, and perhaps some of the others can chip in as well. Why did they think that it was important to write this book?
Well, when we started the project, it was the beginning of 2021, and we had two important occasions. One was the anniversary itself, because it was 3 decades of the Visegrád group, the Visegrád Cooperation, which was started officially in February 1991. And then we had the occasion of Hungarian presidency from the summer last year, which is lasting up to the summer this year. So we thought that it could be really interesting to explore the topics of the beginning of the Visegrád group and to draw some conclusions or results about how the group was achieving in the last 3 decades. And of course, in the book, we were also discussing the plans for the future or the challenges which are waiting for the group. And of course, at that time, we were not expecting those kind of challenges which we see now. So it's kind of, this year is a different year than it was last year. The book was published in the end of 2021. We wanted to introduce it at that time, but we couldn't because it came out too late and we had the Christmas events. And now when we scheduled the book introduction beginning of this year, the war has started. So it created a completely different environment for the whole Visegrád group and for the whole European cooperation agenda. So basically, yes, this was the main goal, the Hungarian presidency and the 30 years anniversary why we started the project.
Thank you, Anton. Peter, perhaps?
Well, what can I add to that? So there is in my opinion, there is a pre-war V4 and the current V4, and this book was born in the pre-war era, which was a successful one. So from 2015, we believed, and I still do believe, that something unique was going on in the middle of Europe. And I do hope that this will continue in the near future. And this was the reason why, this is one of the many reasons why to deal with this topic and to try to find those points, those issues which do connect these nations, which do connect these countries, and look for the possibilities, have to work together, have to show our aims and show ourselves to the Western community. So,
if I can add that to what Peter said, that we see that in the last decades, the Visegrád Group became a brand, and we also talk about that in the book. So we have to really emphasize that the V4, the Visegrád Group itself, is something which is recognizable not only here in Hungary or Slovakia or Czech Republic or Poland, but also in Japan or Brasilia. The people heard about the Visegrád Group, and it's becoming known even more globally. So we need to promote that even more and to speak about the projects, the common projects what we have, and of course to speak about the results which we had before.
Staying with what you were saying, so who is the target audience of the book? Is it aimed more at the Visegrád countries, so other partners, or is it aimed more at, let's say, an external audience, Western Europeans, Japanese you were mentioning? So who is the target audience?
Well, as like for a target audience of Danube Institute, the target audience are those outside of Central Europe and outside of Hungary who are speaking English or at least understand the English language, and to whom we can tell something new about the region and to tell about our perspective on this region. So basically, yes, the book is mostly for those outside of Hungary and outside of the V4, and maybe also for those who are inside the V4 but don't deal with the topic too much. But basically, for decision makers, for experts outside of the Central European region who let's say, collecting information about the region, but don't have the proper sources, or and we help them with these kind of sources. So that's, and again, as like with the Danube Institute, so all of our materials published by us in English. The target audience are decision makers, policy makers, professors, experts in the English-speaking world who want to know more about our region, about Central Europe.
Okay, and Tamás, perhaps for the first two questions, if you have anything to add.
Well, maybe that we know there's a lot of uncertainties right now regarding the future of V4, and I think that there will be very interesting discussions about that later. But I think this book is valuable not despite those uncertainties, but because of those uncertainties, because it is like a timestamp. It is like a historical record which comprehensively showcases the Visegrád brand at the time right before all these global geopolitical turmoil happened. So I think it is very important to have a publication like that. And I think it would need a follow-up, maybe 5 or 10 years later, who knows. But
maybe now.
Maybe now, but for the time being, it is valuable because it presents Visegrád as it was for the past 30 years, which is not just important for us, but I think for a global audience, because yes, just as Commissioner Varju said, the V4 has become a global brand, and well, I think we have experienced setbacks before, and I think the V4 will live on in the future as well.
Thank you. All of you have been emphasizing that the book was written last year. It was published in December, and I guess the manuscripts were closed sometime in October or something like that. So sadly, the geopolitical reality of the region has changed because of the war in Ukraine. But if you could go back in time, or you would have the chance now to change anything in your parts of the book, would you do it? And if yes, what would you change? We'll start with Anton.
Well, yes, definitely the foreign affairs aspect. Maybe we would work more on that. And again, it's a different. Well, the foreign affairs was something which were not really uniting the four V4 countries. We had different different perspective, different narrative on some of the foreign political issues. So we had other things which united us. So now I think we should, probably we would focus more on the foreign policy aspect of the V4 countries, and of course security policy is something which we would need to work more, or actually to rework. And there is one chapter about the military cooperation of the V4, actually written by Peter. So I think it's the focus, the attention on the military cooperation is increasing now. Well, because 3 out of 4 V4 countries are neighboring Ukraine, where the war is going on right now. So, in a military perspective, it's quite important for these countries to talk about the threat coming from the east, coming from Russia, and so this and of course it's not just the V4. We are talking now about the European. There are more and more talks about common European army, about European military agenda, and of course within the European Union, the V4 always had their own agenda, which could be a bit different and more related to the Central European affairs. So I think definitely the military aspect, the foreign affairs, and the security policy are those aspects which we would need to work more in the future. And of course there are aspects of migration, because the V4 countries were targeted the most from the migration coming from Ukraine. So far, almost 4.5 million Ukrainians left their country in the last 6 weeks, and the majority arrived to Poland and Hungary, I think, in a third place, with nearly 500,000 refugees entering Hungary, and Slovakia is also around maybe 400,000. So it's a big challenge for our countries as well, because of course we are accepting all these people. We need to offer humanitarian aid for these people, and on the long run, depending on how long the war will go on, and of course everybody hopes that it will be over as soon as possible. But on the long run, if the war is continuing, then we need the people will stay, the refugees will stay here, and they will be for our economies. It will be something which we have to calculate. So of course the questions, the issues of migration and economic aspects would be we would need to work on these issues as well in the future. So yeah, maybe we could make a follow-up, maybe with the help of other experts in the V4 countries.
Peter, I mean, you were talking about the military chapter.
Well, I think Anton has given us an excellent depiction about the situation, what's going on, and the question originally referred to the past, and I can say that I wouldn't change it. We have to understand that the Visegrádi group is also working on different levels, in my opinion, and one is a practical level in the field, and in the field it works, in my opinion, the best way as it can. And there is also a political level of it, and the political level, it keeps changing, it's moving as the elections go and governments come and new governments are formed. In the continuity, while we were working these studies, I think myself, but also my colleagues, we try to collect as many data as were possible and try to base our studies on these data, be as accurate and be close to the facts and give back those facts in a practical reality way. So I would to answer to your original question, I would do the same. And if we see the whole process, so the V4 is the 31st year of the cooperation, but the cooperation has also a historical past which goes back far to the past, to the original meeting of the three kings in Visegrádi. So it's been in my linguistic and historical perspective, it's been a much longer story, and I think we just have to be close to the facts and have to see how on practical level, how on the level of the people this cooperation works, because this is what really matters is. So the politicians will always come and go, but the level of the cooperation, especially in the military field. So it's I can say it works in excellent way in the framework of the CFSP, as it used to work in an excellent way in the past, in the Warsaw Pact organization, because there was also a cooperation. We didn't call it V4, but on the level of the interoperability and then the level of the soldiers, it also worked well in that case. So I think this is what we should continue, and I hope the politicians will be partners for that.
Thank you. Lastly, Tamás, would you change anything?
I don't think I would personally, but there's one thing maybe. In the book, we were focusing a lot on broader regional cohesion policies and enlargement policies, which I think is a very important aspect of the V4 cooperation. As you may know, the V4 as a bloc has been a very important facilitator of future enlargement prospects, both within the EU and NATO, regarding to West Balkan and Eastern Partnership countries. And maybe if we knew what would happen, we would have put more thinking into those chapters. We would have made it a bit broader. But I think what's needed to be in the book is already in the book. So yes, regarding these cohesion and enlargement policies, definitely these are going to be very important aspects in the future as well, because of the war.
So just something to add, that we were in the last years sometimes we were talking about the V4 plus format, and it includes different countries depending on when and where are you talking about the V4 plus, like Austria. Sometimes we are referring to like Romania. Sometimes we are referring to some countries in the Balkan, or maybe even Croatia. Now maybe we could also add the dimension of Ukraine, right? Because all of our countries, and maybe especially Poland, have special relationship to Ukraine, helping the country in a military way, in a humanitarian way. So maybe this kind of cooperation would increase in the future as well, and develop into something new forms of regional cooperation. So maybe in regard to the V4 plus, we could talk about sometimes, depending on the place and the format, we could talk about Ukraine as well.
And staying a bit with regrets, are there any topics which you think you should have added to the book, or where room for improvement? For example, now talking, what was Peter was saying about connections between the population of the V4 countries. I know that the book was mostly focusing on geopolitics, of course, but for example, chapters about opinion polls, what other V4 countries or Hungarians are thinking about other V4 countries or the cooperation. So are there any chapters which you feel should have been involved, but because of time sensitivities or other aspects you didn't involve in the end? Or is there room for a second book or an updated book, what we were also discussing?
Well, in my opinion, if anyone has ever written a thesis and it's done and it's printed, and then comes the new ideas, what should have been in the book? So I am quite positive about your second idea to write another book and to add those topics which were not included in this one. But I think this one is a whole, and of course, if you look at it in a way to find the incorrectnesses in it, I'm pretty sure you will find something in it. But if you want to find the values in it, and the hard work is also included.
Well, there is one chapter which was written. One of the chapters were written by me, the future of the V4, and I recognize some scenarios and some threats or challenges for the V4, but I was not thinking of the consequences of a war in the neighborhood. So yeah, probably we would need something with scenario-based chapter. How, and of course we were in the middle of the pandemic, but again we were really optimistic about the end of the pandemic and about the economic consequences. And now we have, as we were talking about in the last minutes, that we have a completely different Europe than it was last year or 2 years ago, which facing economic threats, challenges, which facing military security challenges. So maybe such scenario-based projections, I think we would emphasize more time on it, or focus more on such scenarios, because everything which seemed unrealistic before are kind of realistic or happening. And yeah, probably we need to focus more on this kind of scenarios or this kind of issues in the future to be able to predict things in a better way, maybe.
Tamás, anything to add?
Well, the way my colleague said, it's quite comprehensive already. And it's because there's been actually 2 rounds of writing. The whole process was quite long. The first round was during the late spring of 2021. The second was during the late summer. And both rounds started with a week-long brainstorming on what are the topics that we are missing, what can we talk about more. So I think everything that could have been come up with, we did. But yeah, there's always room for improvement, and there's always room for follow-ups. And you know, that's the benefits of writing about politics. There's always something that happens, so we can always add more. And I wish there wasn't as much as is happening right now, but it only means that the history of the V4 is continuing in real time, and we will see, and we will try to assess the situation in the future.
Okay, well, going on to more positive things. I think you were mentioning that the book, because it was written in a different geopolitical situation, is quite optimistic regarding the future of the V4 Corporation. I'm very optimistic still, and of course we will have a separate panel about the future of the V4 Corporation. But still I was wondering, because in the book, of course, there are several chapters which are looking at, one of Peter's chapter is especially interesting in this regard, looking at some of the challenges the V4 faced in its history. And they managed to overcome it during this cooperation. And I think if we have some disagreements now, we will overcome those as well. And this is true for the whole of Europe. I was always saying to our Western friends who were visiting during the election campaign that I think there's much more which binds us, Hungarians and the French, or the Spanish or the Germans, which are, dividing us. And I think that's even much more true for the Visegrádi countries because of our history, because of our similarities in culture. And this war is also, I think, kind of a challenge, but an opportunity to find other venues of cooperation. We were discussing the military cooperation perhaps, but I think we should perhaps talk a bit more about that. But also what Anton was writing in his chapter about the energy interconnectors, perhaps this could be something which gives a bigger push to help the energy interconnectedness of the region. So if briefly we could talk about how do you see the future of the V4 cooperation, what are the challenges and what are the venues which could open up because of this crisis? I will start with Tamás now, because usually he's the, the last.
It's very good that you mentioned energy, because I think as of now, one of the major challenges is going to be further diversification of the energy sector in all of the 4 countries. Some are way ahead than the others within the bloc, but it's not gonna be about individual diversification and individually just getting ahead and sort of scraping their dependencies on Russian energy. But it's also gonna be a big challenge on how we can do this together and build more routes, more gas pipes, and a more cohesive energy policy within the V4, because and this is not going to be just a challenge of the V4 countries, it's going to be the biggest challenge in the upcoming years for all of Europe and all of the West. But I think the V4 has the benefit of being together already and can think together in this regard. And I think these countries need to be able to present a comprehensive strategy and move forward together.
Well, I think one of the main challenges for the V4 countries in the last decades was to find a proper goal, because when at the beginning the V4 started, the main goal was to enter for these countries to enter European Union and to enter the NATO. And when these goals were fulfilled, then kind of the initial aims and goals were done, were completed. So the V4 cooperation were seeking for a new mission, a new aims, and then those goals also arise to have economic cooperation, to have infrastructure connections. And maybe the security situation in the East, the war in Ukraine, also gives another aim, another goal for these countries to cooperate in a way of security, in a way of military cooperation, and of course in a way of energy cooperation, because most of these countries are really dependent on the Russian gas. Hungarian dependency is around 67% of our gas is purchased from Russia. 3 out of 4 V4 countries are landlocked countries, so we don't have the luck to have ports, for example, to have to build LNG terminals, to accept or to find ways to get LNG gas from other countries. Luckily, Poland has such ports, and maybe with the cooperation with Poland, we could also develop some kind of common strategy or on energy routes, energy diversification. Hungary is already purchasing LNG gas from Croatia, from Croatian LNG terminal. So that's one of the way we try to diversificate our energy flows. But I hope that with the cooperation of all the 4 countries, we could go on. But so I think, of course, all the threats or challenges are also containing options for improvement or providing some new goals, some opportunities. So in this regard, maybe right now we see the V4 maybe problematic because of some of the critique from inside the V4 group, but in the long run, I think we will overcome all these obstacles and we will concentrate more on the cooperation, because we really need to be united and to cooperate on all these issues in the future.
Well, who has ever learned international relations in the probably first or the second lecture, he was taught about the first big disagreement between the realists and the idealists. And why I'm saying this, because we keep remodeling these debates inside the Danube Institute, and these are quite challenging and sometimes funny. And I'm one of the biggest realists in the team, and I do believe that if you look at the Visegrádi group, there has always been an interest-based and also a value-based cooperation between the states. And when the one is more powerful, sometimes the other is not so much. But these are keep balancing and keep pulling each other to a direction. Not always this direction is the same, but there are movements, and these movements are important not just on regional, but on European and on international level also. So I think that there are difficulties today, and this horrible war in Ukraine, maybe it's one of them. If we look behind the scenes and look what the countries are doing, then we can find that the gaps are not big, because sometimes the differences are only on verbal, differences exist only on verbal level. On the other hand, and I'm pretty sure of that the geopolitical situation hasn't changed in the last, 3 months in regards to Central Europe. So those realities which were given before are here with us today. And to face with those realities, that's the interest-based approach. And this is what fueled the V4 in the past, and I do believe that this will fuel it in the future. We simply need each other, because without each other, we have to say, but we are weak. And in every cooperation, there are power struggles, and there will be someone who is strong, there will be weak, and usually not the opinion and the interest of the weak will be represented on higher level. So we need each other, and it hasn't changed.
So basically we organize this conference not because we are thinking about the death of the V4, but we are kind of optimistic about the future of the V4. And yes, we do hope that we will overcome all the challenges which we have right now.
I share your optimism. So, and I think what the Commissioner Kristina Vari was also talking about in her speech about the economic cooperation of these countries and how these have been skyrocketing in the past more than 10 years. I think that's also something which shows that there's a huge future for this cooperation. One thing for me which I always identified as a weakness of the Visegrádi cooperation, although I'm also a realist, and realists don't really believe in institutions, but still the Visegrádi the cooperation has few institutions. And in the book, I think you were quite positive in saying that that's actually part of the brand of the V4 countries, and it makes cooperation easier, which of course to some extent is true, but still for me this was always one of the weaknesses of the cooperation, and I think for the future of the cooperation we would need at least some form of institutionalization between these countries, because if you don't have the institutions, it's more easy to deviate from the plans if you have a different governments in place. So I was wondering what you think about the institutionalization of the V4 countries. Are you in agreement that this is actually something which is strengthening the cooperation, or would you agree more with me that perhaps we would need a bit more institutions?
Well, if I may start, in my opinion, this is not the time for institutionalization. So if 2015 wasn't the time and the high politics decided or maybe prolonged or yielded this thing, I think this is not the time for that. I agree with you. So if we want to build something strong, that needs institutions, and there needs institutions which are working effectively, I think this is the time to re-establish those connections which have faded a little bit in the last few weeks, but on the long run, I do agree with you. So this should be a next phase of the cooperation.
I disagree, politely. I think not being too centralized, too institutionalized is really a strong point of the V4. It gives it flexibility for one, a lot of opportunities to extend in whatever areas it might want to, and whomever it might want to. It is the very thing that allows it to explore all the various V4 plus formats. As it started during the last decade, the main mission, as Anton said, we are looking for a new mission. I think we aren't. We have our mission. It is a broader regional cohesion. We just need to strengthen it. Well, that was the main mission of the last 10 years, and this is what produced, for example, this very informal, very flexible V4 plus 7 format, which is a sort of direct precursor of the 3Cs initiative also, which I think will have a way more important place in the politics and strategic history of Europe in the next decade. Even if you think security-wise, even if you think energy-wise, this is the model that has been working, and I think that is what should be continued. Of course, within these formats, the V4 countries need to present a unified core, but this informal and uninstitutionalized format is what gives them their edge and their opportunity to expand on the issues when they need it the most.
Yeah, I do agree. We are part of European Union. We are part of NATO. So we have institutionalized institutions, organizations. So there are other examples globally and in Europe which are not institutionalized and working well, like the Nordic, the Benelux countries. And yes, given the flexibility of the V4, I think it's a plus. So we need to go on with common goals, common policies, to harmonize our strategies in different directions. But I think right now institutionalization is not what we need right now. Maybe in the future, because basically the V4 cooperation evolves in a natural way. So maybe in the future we will need it. I don't know. But in the current stage, I think we are okay without it. We just need really common goals and common strategies together with our partners in Central Europe and, of course, partners outside of Central Europe.
It seems we have a tie then. Although Anton was open to the idea of having institutions in the... of course, I'm not suggesting we need them now. I mean, we have a war in the neighborhood, so we have more pressing matters than building institutions. But I would like to stick with what Tamás was saying about the 3Cs initiative, because I think in the book, again, you were quite optimistic that these two corporations can complement each other. But there's some people who are more critical and say that perhaps the 3Cs initiative can overshadow the V4, or the V4 can turn into the 3Cs initiative. How do you see that? Do you think these two institutions are complementing each other, are rivals, or are natural allies, and the V4 can potentially be a V7 or something? Not sure who wants to start. Tamás, because he brought up the 3Cs initiative.
Well, at the moment, it's not, the Visegrádi 4 is a well-established, very old and well-known brand, both in Europe and globally, which the 3Cs is not yet. but I don't think even it becomes a very strong cooperation between the countries of participating in. I don't think it's going to be any kind of rivalry because the scopes are just different. The Visegrádi 4 is a very comprehensive, strategic, political, cultural forum, while the Three Seas initiative, it's basically transportation, energy. It's a means to facilitate interregional trade between its members. In this regard, the Three Seas, I think it's gonna be a very important, and it could have become a very efficient tool complementing the V4 cooperation, but it's not gonna become anything that would rival it politically.
Well, I also think that the Visegrádi group is something which is not, well, we have the 3 decades anniversary, we had it last year, but it goes back in time for many centuries. So I think this is something which has cultural roots, historical roots, and in this way, this kind of relationship between these countries, at least I hope to believe that it's different than if you combine all the countries from the Three Seas initiative. And then, of course, there are other types of cooperation in the region, like the Bucharest 9, the Lublin Triangle, the Chinese-led 17+1. So there are other types of cooperation on a regional level. I think they are different, and the goals, the aims are different, and I really can't imagine or can't believe that like the Three Seas initiative would eventually substitute the V4, because these are very different on cooperation level. They are different, and the V4 is a brand. Well, I think the Three Seas initiative is different. It's more of a project. It's not an established brand going back centuries before. So yeah, I think it's just maybe it's complementing, but on different project-based levels, but not substituting it.
Well, in my opinion, my colleagues have told everything in this regard, so it's hard to add anything. If I had some other information, I would have definitely put it in the book. I can just reaffirm what Anton has just said, that every cooperation needs time. And there is the time, there has been a lot of time in the V4 cooperation, and maybe we should just get back to this question 50 years later, and we will be much smarter.
Thank you. We're actually basically out of time, so I would like to thank our panelists Anton, Peter and Tamás for joining us and having this interesting talk about the book, but also, of course, partly about the Visegrádi cooperation. We will have a short coffee break and then continue our discussion about the past. First, the past of the V4 cooperation, and after another coffee break, the future of the V4 cooperation. And there's copies of the book upstairs, so if you're interested, you're more than welcome to take a copy with you. It's free, so perhaps that's a plus incentive. But thank you again for the panelists, and thank you for the audience for being with us, and I hope you can stay for the 2 other panels as well. Thank you.